1,500 people, $200 million, 22 months in prison, and then applause. You've probably heard this story before, watched a film, maybe even laughed. But today we're going to talk about everything that film didn't show, because in financial fraud there is a systematic rule. The criminal becomes a legend, the victims become numbers, and today we are going to reverse that equation. Let's first establish a place and time. 1980s. America, the Reagan era, a period dominated by trickle-down economics, where deregulation was presented as an ideology, where the belief that the market would correct itself had been transformed into something close to religious dogma. Wall Street in that era was not merely a financial center, but was becoming a cultural icon. Gordon Gekko was saying, "Greed is good," and people wanted to believe it. Because the system made it possible, regulatory institutions had been deliberately weakened, restrictions on the banking sector were being lifted, and in this vacuum, a golden age was beginning for opportunists. It was precisely into this landscape that Jordan Belfort stepped. Born in 1962 in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, his devilish intelligence and boundless energy were things everyone acknowledged. The only thing missing in Jordan Belfort was a moral compass. After college, Belfort sold meat and seafood door-to-door, achieved nearly $100,000 in monthly revenue, but had no supply chain, no payment system, no logistics, only speed and persuasion. It all collapsed, and from that collapse, he learned one thing. The quality of the product doesn't matter. What matters is the ability to sell. He carried that instinct to Wall Street, landed commission-based work at L.F. Rothschild, learned how the markets moved. But his real discovery came after the Black Monday crisis of 1987, because while the crash was hitting large firms, one small, unregulated, disorganized space was still standing. Penny stocks, meaning shares valued between a few cents and a few dollars, completely outside SEC oversight, traded on informal markets called pink sheets, shares of companies that mostly existed only on paper or were entirely fictitious. The standard Wall Street commission was 1 to 3%. Here it was 50%. This was not a business opportunity but a structural hunting trap, and Belfort understood it immediately. Stratton Oakmont, which he founded in 1989, initially operated out of an ordinary office on Long Island, but growth came at an astonishing pace, and the secret of that growth was the recruitment model. Belfort didn't want experienced brokers because an experienced broker asks questions, grows suspicious, carries ethical concerns. He wanted bartenders, college dropouts, neighborhood kids, meaning people who hadn't internalized the system, who had only hunger, and who were ready to be completely molded. This is where we enter the very center of the psychological manipulation analysis, because the sales method Belfort developed called straight-line persuasion was nothing other than the misuse of modern behavioral psychology. The essence of the method was this: keep a customer on the line between yes and no, never let them reach a full point of refusal, appear to absorb objections while dissolving them, exploit ambiguity, present the rush decision as a virtue. As Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman demonstrated in his work Thinking Fast and Slow, under pressure and time constraints, people systematically make irrational decisions. The fast and emotional brain called System 1 takes over, analytical thinking goes offline, and Belfort's entire sales technique was targeting exactly this neuropsychological vulnerability. Brokers never told customers, "Understand this company." On the contrary, they said, "You don't need to understand the company. What you need to do is act before the big investors even sniff this out." This sentence simultaneously strokes the ego, creates panic, and blocks analytical evaluation. Moreover, the brokers themselves were inside the system. Belfort applied the same psychology to them as well. Reward high performance with applause, punish low performance with humiliation, create a competitive environment, interweave money with identity, and so both customers and employees became captives of the system. I want to pause here and ask you to subscribe to our channel, because for those who want to follow these kinds of analyses regularly, the subscribe button and the bell are important right at this moment. Let's continue. Stratton's target audience was the people Wall Street had deliberately ignored, and this was not coincidence. It was strategy. Large institutional investors ask questions, grow suspicious, hire lawyers. But an Ohio teacher thinking of investing her retirement savings for the first time, a small business owner in Texas looking to put his savings to work, a veteran returning from Vietnam who trusted his country, these people don't object, don't hire lawyers, trust blindly, which is precisely why the profile of Stratton's victims is homogeneous. Middle class, working, accumulated savings over a lifetime, people who trusted the system. Ohio elementary school teacher Margaret Bauer worked for 30 years, put her $87,000 retirement savings into a stock she was guided toward as low-risk, stable return. 6 months later, $11,000 remained in her account, and in federal court she said this: "I blamed myself for years. Was I stupid? But I wasn't stupid. I was deceived. That's the difference." Small business owner Familia Torres from Texas put the $60,000 her aunt had left her children's university money, into the market in 3 weeks because the broker had said, "This opportunity closes in 48 hours. The stock lost 97% of its value in 4 months, and that family had to completely replanning their children's education. Vietnam veteran Robert Chen trusted his country and its markets when he returned from the war, lost $140,000 and spent the following decade as a tenant. He had previously owned his own home. Pennsylvania truck driver Dennis Walsh wanted a small boat in retirement, put his $55,000 savings into a stock described as high growth potential through Stratton. The stock became worthless in 8 weeks. Walsh said in court, "I don't want the boat anymore, I just want my money back." He didn't get it. A study conducted years later found that 73% of Stratton's victims never received any compensation. The court ordered $110 million in restitution. The amount paid to date is under $12 million, less than 11%. The rest buried in offshore accounts, real estate trusts, and legal loopholes. So why did these legal loopholes exist? Why do they still exist? Because the wave of financial deregulation carried out in the 1980s, particularly the Garn-Saint-Germain Depository Institutions Act passed in 1982, and a series of legislative changes that followed, deliberately weakened oversight mechanisms. The SEC's budget and staff in that era could in no way keep pace with the growth of the market. In the early 1990s, the SEC's entire inspector staff was far below today's numbers, and they had neither the legal authority nor the practical capacity to oversee thousands of companies trading on the pink sheet market. Moreover, the free market ideology was so powerful in that era that demanding regulation was considered almost un-American. In this vacuum, structures like Stratton didn't merely grow, they flourished. The FBI put Stratton on its radar in 1992, opened an investigation, but the raid didn't come until 1996. In those 4 years, Belfort and his team stole millions more while under investigation. Moreover, while under active investigation, he transferred another $2 million to Switzerland. This transfer was on record and became the very thread that unraveled his conviction. Belfort pleaded guilty in 1998, exposed more than 30 employees, handed over his own network and spent 22 months in a minimum security facility, played tennis in the mornings, lifted weights in the afternoons, rode in the evenings, and those 22 months were the price for 7 years of $200 million crime. According to FBI data, the average prison sentence for financial crimes in the United States is about 1/8 of the sentence given for violent crimes. Someone who robs a market gets 3 to 5 years. The scale of Belfort's crime doesn't even accept comparison. Now let's come to 2025 because this story didn't stay in the past, it only changed its clothes. Pump and dump cases in the cryptocurrency market are technically almost no different from Stratton Oakmont. A token is created, artificial hype is generated through social media, influencers promote it for payment, small investors enter, big players exit, the token collapses. According to the FTC's 2023 report, losses from crypto fraud reached $5.6 billion in that year alone. The average victim loss was $2,600. This figure sounds low, but the vast majority of these are middle-class people trying to put their small savings into a digital asset for the first time. MLM meaning multi-level marketing structures use the same psychological tools, urgency, community pressure. The narrative of you too can be successful. According to FTC data, 99% of MLM participants lose money. 99%. This is not coincidence. It is a structural outcome. And today, a significant portion of accounts selling financial freedom on social media are nothing more than versions of Belfort's techniques adapted to the Instagram stories and TikTok format. The tool changed, the psychology didn't. At this point, I want to address Islamic finance principles within a broader framework because these are not abstract religious rules. They contain concrete solution mechanisms against the structural failures of the current financial order, and this connection is gaining increasing recognition in the academic world. The prohibition of Gharar in Islamic law, meaning the prohibition of commercial transactions containing uncertainty and deception, overlaps with modern securities law's disclosure requirement but is far more comprehensive. The prohibition of Gharar forbids not only providing false information but also withholding information. A broker who says you don't need to understand is guilty from the outset under Islamic commercial law. The prohibition of Riba, meaning interest, prohibits trade in money that creates no speculative and productive value. The essence of Stratton's pump and dump model was managing share prices through artificial movements independent of the company's real value and profiting from that movement, meaning pure speculative exploitation, a model directly blocked by the logic of the Riba prohibition. Islamic finance instruments such as Mudarabah and Mudarabah require risk-sharing and transparency. In Mudarabah, the investor contributes capital, the entrepreneur contributes labor, profit, and loss are shared. This structure makes the asymmetry Belfort's victims experienced, meaning the imbalance of broker profits, investor suffers losses, structurally impossible. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "May Allah have mercy on one who is easy when he sells," but he also said, "Whoever deceives us is not one of us." When these two principles are read together, the essence of Islam's commercial ethics emerges: facilitate but don't deceive, grow but don't swindle. According to the IMF's 2010 working paper, Islamic finance institutions suffered far less damage than conventional banks during the 2008 global financial crisis because they were not exposed to derivative instruments, complex speculative tools, and growth models based on excessive leverage. This is not a matter of faith. It is a matter of system design, and clarifying this distinction is important. The Quran states, "O you who believe, do not consume one another's wealth unjustly, only through mutually agreed trade." Consent requires knowledge. Knowledge requires transparency. When this chain is broken, it is not trade but robbery that begins. And what Belfort did was exactly that. He broke every link. Now I come to the most disturbing question: why do we still applaud this system? In studies conducted when the film came out in 2013, more than 40% of university students describe Belfort as a successful person. This is not the product of the film, but of a cultural narrative, a mental framework created by the logic of if you get results, you've won, if you're rich, you're right. Belfort himself summarizes this best: "I regret what I did, but everyone is greedy." This sentence is not an apology. It is an attempt to make all of humanity complicit in the crime to escape responsibility. And the sad thing is, this narrative worked. Belfort today travels from stage to stage: motivational speaker, sales coach, podcast host, ticket prices between $200 and $2,000. He now packages and sells the sales techniques that led him to prison. He carries the Wolf nickname not as a mark of shame, but as a brand identity. The film made $392 million in revenue, and through royalties, a portion of that went back to Belfort, while victims wait for compensation. According to FTC data, 65% of financial fraud victims never receive full restitution, and the vast majority of these people never invest again, no longer trust the savings system, no longer believe in institutional structures. What Belfort stole was not only money, but a teacher's faith in the future, a veteran's trust in his country, a family's hope for their children. None of this appears in stock charts. It passes as a number in court records and moves on. This video was not made to tell a legend. It was made to explain a system, because if this narrative doesn't change, only Belfort's name changes, it becomes crypto, it becomes MLM, it becomes a social media investment guru, but the mechanism stays the same, the victim profile stays the same, the absence of justice stays the same. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell, because if you don't want to miss these kinds of structural analyses, we need you, not the algorithm. I'm asking you to write this in the comments below. Do you think the sentences given for financial fraud crimes are sufficient? And why do these crimes receive lighter sentences than violent crimes? I read every comment. See you in the next video.